So let's begin with our discussion. So we are going to extend our discussion from the last session, and we'll be having few important guidelines once again in this session. So in the last session, we have talked about use of voice while writing the technical document, and we talked about whether to use active voice, whether to use passive voice, when active voice is preferred, when passive voice is preferred. Further, we focused upon the tense to be used and the verbs, right? So which tense to be used and in which section we should prefer to use which tense. Also, we had a discussion about that. Okay, now the same discussion actually we are going to extend regarding structuring of sentences, right? So many times we write some complex sentences in our documents, okay? But usually what happens is if we form a complex structure of the sentence, then many times it becomes very difficult for the reader to understand whatever is the meaning or whatever is the content in that sentence. So this is one important guideline that we should avoid complex sentence structures, right? So if there is a need to write such kinds of complex sentences, instead of writing the complex sentences, we need to transform these complex sentences by splitting up those sentences into some small sentences. We should go with some simple or the compound sentences. No doubt, we can make use of some simple structures of the sentences, or even the compound sentences are also okay. But make sure that whenever we frame the sentences, those sentences are not too complex, not too long. So if the sentence becomes too long, then break that sentence into some small sentences, multiple sentences, in order to improve the readability of the content. Right? Now, the next guideline is whenever we are writing any particular sentence, please focus upon one idea per sentence and try to emphasize the most important element, the most important thing, okay, that you intend to convey to the reader. Okay, so typically use or focus on one idea per sentence. Focus on one idea per sentence. Do not write a sentence comprising more than one ideas, those you are emphasizing. Right? It would become complex to understand for the reader who is reading your document for the very first time. Okay? Now, the next thing that we should understand is we should eliminate redundancies and we should avoid unnecessary repetition of the words. What does this mean? So, usually in a proposal or a project report, typically we are having the sections like abstract and introduction. So many times, some of the content students try to repeat in these two sections, abstract also and introduction part also, right? And many times what happens is the same paragraph or the same sentence is being duplicated in these two sections typically. So even though there is a need to communicate the same information in both the sections, do not use exactly similar words or exactly similar constructs of the sentences in these two sections. Even though sometimes the same idea you would like to communicate to the reader in both these sections, try to have some variety in framing the sentences. So do not use the similar constructs, do not use exactly same words, exactly same sentences. Try to eliminate the redundancies. Even many times it happens that we use or we write the sentences and typically we are making use of the similar kinds of words in lots of sentences in a paragraph. So it is also not good. Okay, so if you are repeating the words unnecessarily or if you are making use of the same word in various sentences, then the reader may get bored while reading your document. So don't do that. Instead, try to find out the synonyms for the words. Okay, and use different words. So unnecessary repetition of the words should be avoided. Right? Also, bring some kind of variety while writing your document. So you may use some simple statements, you may use some compound statements, some short statements, comparatively some long sentences. Okay, so a mix of everything. If you are using monotonously the similar kind of structures of the sentences, then once again it becomes very monotonous and it would be the reader may get bored while reading such kinds of documents. So have a variety of structures, have a variety of sentences while writing the document. Further, never begin a sentence with conjunctions such as for, and, or, but, and so on. So never begin a sentence. Say for example, and. Many times students use the first word of the sentence as and. No, never. First word of the sentence as but. Never use such kind of use of the conjunctions while writing the sentences, or the first word as a conjunction while writing the sentence. So never use such kinds of words. Never begin a sentence with such kinds of words. Please remember. Okay, so it will improve the way how you write your document. Is that clear?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. Proceed with few more guidelines. Usually, in technical writing, the author remains independent from the subject of the article. What I mean by that? Once again, I mentioned earlier that there is a debate, okay, while using the voice, whether we should go with active voice or whether we should go with passive voice. Okay, and traditionally, the people used to say that one should go with passive voice. Okay, and now also many times we should avoid writing the words like I, you, we while writing the technical documents. So technical documents usually do not contain such kinds of words. So many times while writing the technical documents, we should bring in the efforts such that the author remains independent from the subject of the article. So try to avoid such kinds of words unless it becomes really very important so as to simplify our sentences. Right? I have already explained you when we can go with such kind of statements having active voice and when we can use such kinds of words. But typically try to avoid that. Okay, now here are few examples of writing the statements or sentences. Okay, see here, the statement is written or the sentence is written like in this chapter. It is described how the two-dimensional system is extended to a three-dimensional system. Okay, grammatically this statement is correct, no issues. Okay, what we have written in this chapter, it is described how the two-dimensional system is extended to a three-dimensional system. Even though this sentence is correct, okay, avoid such kind of a sentence. Instead, how we can improve our writing? See here, we can write, instead of this, we can write, this chapter contains the extension from a two-dimensional system to a three-dimensional system. I'll repeat how we have improved the statement. This chapter contains the extension from a two-dimensional system to a three-dimensional system. Right? So this sentence is more clear. That is actually being converted in the noun form. Right? And what has been written? This chapter contains the extension from a two-dimensional system to a three-dimensional system. So this statement is more clearer than this. And that is why we should recommend such kind of a writing. One more example, let us look at. The following results are obtained in this experiment. Perfectly all right. We can write such kind of a statement. The following results are obtained in this experiment. But it would have been better to write this statement like the experiment yields following results. The experiment yields following results. So this is more appropriate. So this is recommended.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So while writing your technical documents, please try to focus upon how you are structuring the sentences. And instead of having some complicated thing while writing the sentence, precisely mention whatever you would like to emphasize and construct simple sentences. Those will make sense. Okay, now let us proceed further with the symbols, formulas and equations. Those we are making use of while writing the documents. So, use standard symbols and notations consistently throughout the text. And typically, the symbols that we are making use of are written in italics. So whatever are the literals, whatever are the symbols, whatever are the notations, those we are making use of, we should consistently use the same thing. What does this mean? Say for example, I want to write something related to computation of mean of some set of data. Mean of some set of data. So if I want to depict, if I want to write that compute the mean of data, and if I'm making use of some symbol to compute this mean, maybe I'll be using this Greek letter mu. Typically, this mu stands for mean. Okay, so if I'm making use of this mu, that is a standard symbol, then consistently throughout the document, wherever you would like to compute the mean or mention the mean of the data, use consistently the same symbol. use consistently the same notation if you are using some notation. Okay, and typically if we are using such kinds of symbols in our document, those should be written in italics. Please remember. So see, suppose I am using the expression like alpha square plus beta square, gamma square is equal to alpha square plus beta square. Okay, then this alpha, this beta, this gamma are the symbols, standard symbols. So these symbols need to be written in italics. So whichever are the literals, those you are using. Suppose you are saying that we are having n number of samples or n number of data points. Okay, so this n is the literal that you are using to denote the number of samples, number of data points maybe. Okay, so this n should be written in italics. And wherever you are referring to the number of data points, you should refer to the same symbol. With the next point, define the symbols on first use in the text and add units and parameters if required. And be consistent in using these symbols throughout the text. So wherever you are using the symbol for the very first time, define that particular symbol. What does this mean? Suppose you are computing the mean, okay, and you are writing something like this. Okay, so if you are writing such kind of the expression, so for the very first time, whenever you are writing such kind of expression, you should mention, you should define what each symbol means. So you should write here where mu is the mean of data. Okay, you should mention where n equal to the number of data points. So likewise, you should provide the meaning for each parameter, each symbol. If required, you should provide the unit for that particular symbol. Okay, so wherever you are using for the very first time that particular symbol, then add the units, define that symbol, what you mean by that symbol, and be consistent in using that symbol throughout the text. Okay, also you should keep record of the symbols those you are writing or those you are using. Why we should have such kind of a record with us? Because we should not repeat the same symbol for some different use. Okay, we should not use the same symbol for some different use, and that is why you should always keep a record of the symbols, that this symbol is being used for this particular notation or to denote this particular thing in our report. This symbol is used to denote some other attribute or parameter in the report, and likewise. So do not use the same symbol, okay, repeatedly to denote some other quantity or some other thing that you would like to communicate. Okay, and that is why you should know which symbol is used for what. Okay, also do not mix the capital and small letters. Do not mix capital and small letters while abbreviating those notations or symbols. Okay, so these are few important guidelines related to use of symbols. Okay, now if we are using the short formulas and the short equations, then can write those equations as a part of the text. If you are making use of some long formulas and equations, then long formulas and equations are placed as the separate line in the text. Okay, so see here one example. If I want to use such kind of equation, then I need to write this equation on separate line because this is a long formula or long equation. Y equal to ax square plus bx plus c. Okay, see here whichever are the notations, those we are using a, b, x, y, these are in italics. Okay, what are those a, b and c that has been mentioned, where a, b, c result from some other equation. So this is the equation number that we are referring to. So from where we got this a, b, c, we are mentioning here, where a, b and c result from 3.23. So this is some equation number from where we have obtained this a, b and c. Also, whenever we are writing the equation on separate line, you should provide the equation number to that equation. So every equation that is written as the separate line in the text, that equation should have the equation number. Compulsory. And that equation should be referred into the text. I am going to provide you few examples wherein you can understand how actually the equations are being written and used while writing the documents. Okay, first understand the essential things about the formulas and equations, symbols, and lots of other things also. Okay, so let's talk about tables, figures, and graphs. Visual elements such as graphs, charts, tables, photographs, diagrams, maps. These are the visual elements. Those we may have in our technical document. So these visual elements actually capture the reader's attention and help them to understand your ideas with more details. There is one important saying that a picture says 1,000 words. So whatever you are describing using 1,000 words, that can be described using a single picture. So while preparing your documents, you should use visual elements because visual elements are more illustrative. Visual elements capture the attention of the reader, and visual elements are more effective in delivering whatever you intend to explain. So what are these visual elements? Graphs, charts, tables, photographs, diagrams, maps, all are the visual elements. And we should use such kinds of visual elements to improve the quality of our technical documents. So visuals usually help to augment your written ideas and simplify the complicated textual descriptions. So that is the significance why we should use the visuals in preparation of our technical documents or reports. Right? So few important points whenever we are using such kinds of visuals. Use tables or figures or graphs to display main and significant results. So tables can be used to provide significant results. Figures can also be used, or graphs, charts can also be used to display some important results. Tables typically are being used to present exact values or information. So exact information. So we have used table to compare various items in our literature. Okay, and we have prepared a table comparing different papers, different material, right? And we used some important parameters to compare our literature, and we come up with a table. So table precisely is being used to provide some precise information, some exact values, and so on. Some results. Okay, now when to use graphs? To understand some patterns or the relationships between multiple sets of data. I'll repeat. To understand patterns and relationships between multiple sets of data, then we should use graph or a chart. Okay, then few important guidelines. Whenever we are using tables, figures, graphs, these should convey some interesting new information, and it should add value to the text. Right? What does this mean? Many times the people, while writing the technical document, what they do? They depict some information in tabular form. Okay, so some numeric data is being represented using a table. And many times what they do, the same data they represent using a graph also. So this is not the ideal situation. Each table or each figure or each graph should convey something new, some new information that adds value to your text. Okay, if the same information is being represented in the tabular form and using the same information, if you are drawing the graph and once again you are representing the same data using a graph, then that is not a good way. So either you use table or you may use a graph to convey that particular information. But don't go with both the things simultaneously to convey the same information, because that is the redundancy. Are you getting me?
Yes, ma'am.
Say for example, let me give you one example. Suppose I am preparing a table that is showing the accuracy for different approaches that I have used or I have implemented. Okay, so let us assume that I have used algorithm 1, I have used some algorithm 2, I have used some algorithm 3. Okay, and I am having some accuracy with respect to algorithm 1. Say it is 70%, then with respect to algorithm 2, say this is 90%, with respect to algorithm 3, it is 93%. Okay, so I have prepared a table to show the accuracies of different algorithms. Okay, so I'm communicating some information using this table. That is fine. But what many times people do, even though I have communicated this with a table, we try to plot a column chart using the same information. So how we are plotting that chart? See here. I am plotting the chart like this. On the horizontal axis, I may have the algorithm. Okay, so I may have here algorithm 1, algorithm 2, algorithm 3. Okay, and I'll be having some scale over here. So 10, 20, 30, so on up to 100 on this vertical axis. So algorithm 1 is giving me the accuracy that is 70%. So somewhere here I am having 70%. So I may plot it using such kind of a column chart. Okay, algorithm 2 is giving me 90% accuracy. So here is say 90%. So I'll be drawing here a column depicting the accuracy of this algorithm 2. Similarly, it is 93. So accordingly, I'll be plotting this column also for algorithm 3. The algorithm 3. Okay, I may put the data label also 70, 90 and 93. So the same data is being represented in the table form and the same data is being represented using a chart. Okay, so either you go with table or you go with chart because the same data you are representing. Don't use simultaneously both the things, table also and this chart also. Got it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Fine. So every visual that you are using in your technical report should convey some new information. Right. Now, look at few important points related to tables, figures, graphs, or the visuals in general. Okay. So we should provide some number with respect to each table, figure, and graph, or any visual, any picture that we are using, okay, in the sequence in which they will be referred to. I'll repeat. We should number every table, every figure, and every graph. So it should not happen that we have drawn some figure and we have not given any number to that figure or to that table or to that graph. And not only it is mandatory to provide the number to the respective visual, we should refer to that particular figure number or that particular table number through our text. Okay, and also the numbers should be given in such a way that the sequence in which these figures, these tables are referred, the sequence should be maintained. So if I'm having, say for example, if I'm having, say here figure 1, figure 2 with some caption, if I'm having, okay, and I'm having here say figure 3 with some caption. So I should refer to all those figures through my text, and that too, if this is my figure 1, then in my reference I should refer to the figure in the same sequence. So I should refer to this figure first, then I should refer to this figure, figure number 2, then I should refer to figure number 3. If it happens that you want to refer to this figure number 3 initially, then accordingly you put this figure 3 as figure 1. So swap these. So maintain the sequence in which you have placed those figures in your document, and the sequence in which you are referring to these figures in your text, the sequence should be the same. Is that clear? Yes. Is that clear?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Right. Regarding the captions, those we are providing. If we are making use of the tables, tables should be numbered and captioned above the table. So always table number and table caption should be provided above the table. Whereas if we are using the figures and graphs, the figures and graphs should be labeled below that figure or below that graph with their respective number and the descriptive title or the caption. So let me give you the example of a table. So if this is the table that we have come up with, right? So always make sure that each table is having some caption. So this is the caption. Each table should have the associated number. Okay, and the caption and number of the table should be placed above the table. Above the table. Fine. So this is with respect to tables. If we are using figures and graphs, as I mentioned, figures and graphs should be labeled below with their number and the descriptive title. So see here, this is a block diagram showing some process. Okay, so the figure number and the figure title is being provided below actually the figure. Okay, this is one more example. See here, this is figure number, this is the title for the figure, and this figure actually is having two parts. Okay, so this first part of the figure is labeled as A and the second part of the figure is labeled as B. See here, this is the way how we should use the conventions while depicting the figures. If the figure is having two different parts, then we should label these two parts also like A, B. Okay, and while writing the caption, while writing the title of the figure, see here, what is the title for the figure? We have provided the number and the title. What is the title? Detection of facial landmarks and cropping of lip region. So that is the overall title for this figure. And there are two parts. Okay, so what this A means, that also need to be mentioned here in the title. A, detection of facial landmarks. B, localization of mouth or lips for cropping. Okay, so individual titles for this part A and part B of the figure also need to be mentioned. So these are the standards. Those we should use while writing or while using the figures in our document.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Let us go to a few more important guidelines. Refer to every table, figure and graph included in the text by using the present tense. What we mean by that? Suppose we are making use of some figure, say figure 1. Then we should refer to that figure in our text using the present tense like figure 1 describes. Or we may write figure 1 depicts. the block diagram of pre-processing. Likewise, we should formulate the sentences. Figure 1 depicts, figure 1 describes, or table 1 shows. Is that okay? So refer to every table, figure, graph included in the text by using the present tense. Okay, now let us proceed with the next comment. Ensure that each reference to table, figure and graph cites the corresponding number. So already I have talked about this. Every table, figure, graph need to be referred into the text with the corresponding number associated with that table, figure and graph. Okay, now let us focus more upon the tables. So while preparing the table, be consistent in font type and size. So if we are making use of multiple tables, then make sure that all the tables are using similar font, similar size of the font, similar style of the table and so on. So be consistent in these aspects. Okay, then make sure that column or row. So in table we may have the label for the column or the label for the row. So make sure that the column or row or rather the labels of the column and row are clearly separated from the data. Okay, what does this mean? Give you once again the same example. So see here, this is the row, and in this row, okay, we are mentioning the title for each column. So this column represents the paper and year of publication. This column represents the methodology. This column represents limitation and so on. Okay, so this is the label for this particular column. This is the label for this particular column. Okay, so usually whichever are the labels, those we are designating for the column, or sometimes we may provide the label to the row. Okay, so these row labels or the column labels need to be clearly separated from the data. So this is the data that we have in our table. So there should be some distinction between the data that we are providing and the label that we have for that particular column or row. Okay, if we are having any kinds of measurements, those are being mentioned in our table, then do not forget to include the unit of measurement. Say for example, if I am using a table and that is providing the accuracy, okay, then as I mentioned earlier, I'll be having algorithm and accuracy. So I need to mention here the unit for the accuracy. So accuracy is being measured in percentage. So I need to mention that accuracy, in parenthesis I may mention percentage. So do not forget to include the units of measurement if applicable. Okay, now I hope you must have understood the concept. Now the next important point is make sure that the decimal numbers are aligned on the decimal point in a table. What does this mean? See here one example. In this example, see here we have listed several methods, okay, and we have provided the accuracies. See here, table number is given, caption for the table is provided, okay. and we are having some numeric data here. So make sure that if we are having the decimal numbers, then these decimal numbers are aligned on the decimal points, meaning all the decimal points, right, should be aligned with one another. It should not happen that I have written say 50.2 here and I have written 49.7 like this. So these decimal points are not aligned. So this will not good, and this is not a good representation. Many times what you do, we do not put enough attention while providing the data and while designing such kinds of tables. So what you do, maybe sometime for one row you are having center justification, for some other row you are having right justification for the column, for some row you will be having left justification for the column. So there is a mismatch in the quantities those you are representing in the form of a table. So it should not happen. So make sure that the decimal numbers are aligned on the decimal. The next important guideline: keep the tables as simple as possible. Too much unnecessary elements and decoration. We are using here the word decoration. Too much unnecessary elements and decoration such as horizontal and vertical rules or borders between the rows, borders between the columns, okay, or unnecessarily double borders or dashed borders do not decorate your table. Make it as simple as possible so that it is possible for the reader to understand whatever is being mentioned, whatever is being described here in the tabular form. Okay? Is that okay? Shall I proceed? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Let us talk about the graphs. So see here, this is one of the examples of the graph that we may have. So this is a column chart actually. Okay, and this is a graph that we are showing. So see here, this graph is in the form of a figure. So figure number is being provided. Figure caption is also provided. If we are making use of such kind of a chart, do not forget to provide the title for the chart. So this chart, what this chart is meant for? It is performance analysis of each model for each digit. So what is there on the horizontal axis? Digits. So name the axis. What is there on the horizontal axis? It is a digit. What is there on the vertical axis? It is the accuracy. Okay, so do not forget to give the appropriate titles to the axis. Okay, do not forget to provide the title for the chart. Okay, these are called as the legends. So we are depicting here the performance for 4 different models. So we are using here the legend, like this blue bar or blue column is showing the result for LSTM architecture. This yellow bar or yellow column is depicting the result for attention LSTM model. The third one, green, is meant for some other model. Red is meant for some other model. So this is called as the legend. So use appropriate legends to depict the different types of algorithms or whatever it may be, different types of models, those you are trying to explain using this particular chart. Okay. So with respect to the graphs, we are having here few comments. So please note down and listen to it carefully. Label the axis. As I mentioned, provide the labels to the axis. So reader should understand whatever is there on x-axis and whatever is there on y-axis. Show parameters and units and describe the scale of every graph. Then make sure the center point or reference point of the graph is located at the 0 point on the horizontal axis and 0 point on the vertical axis. If the y-axis is not starting at 0 point, then it may happen that your graph can easily mislead the reader. Right? So whatever visual, whatever graph that you are using, the graph should be explanatory and it should not create any kind of confusion in the mind of your reader. So make sure to properly assign the scale on x-axis and y-axis. Typically, both x and y-axis should be divided into equally spaced intervals. As I mentioned already, add a legend or the explanatory caption. A legend should be placed carefully. Okay, so these are the legends, those we have mentioned. Okay, then ensure that the quality of the graph is good. What does this mean? Ensure that the graph is sufficiently large and it is readable. Also, associated with this graph, you write some text interpreting the information that you have depicted in the graph. So whenever the reader reads the information referring to the graph, then the idea would be more clear. Okay? So make sure that whenever you are putting any graph associated with that graph, you should have some information that explains that particular graph. Okay, once again, keep the graph very simple. Do not use unnecessarily some grid lines, some tick marks, some crosses, something like that. Okay, so unnecessarily do not use such kinds of ornamental material, okay, to depict the graph. So don't go for grid lines, unnecessary tick marks and so on. Okay, usually try to avoid three-dimensional graphs because many times it happens that the three-dimensional graphs are not clear to understand or three-dimensional graphs are not easy to interpret. Many times it happens. So try to avoid three-dimensional graphs. Instead, you stick to two-dimensional graphs. So that was related to the graphs. Now, point that I would like to mention here is related to the figures, diagrams and flowcharts. So I'll be explaining you the use of figures, diagrams and flowcharts in the next class. In fact, we have discussed to some extent these details in our tutorial sessions and I have explained you few of the tools to draw the diagrams, flowcharts, okay, and figures. So I would be giving you few examples with respect to actually the technical documents, real technical documents, so that you can understand how we can make use of such kinds of different diagrams, okay, so that we can improve upon the quality of our technical document, right? So in the next class, I'll be focusing upon figures, diagrams and flowcharts. Right, so let's conclude today's session. I hope you must have understood whatever we discussed and I believe that you will follow all those guidelines while preparing your documents. Do not forget these guidelines. So these guidelines are really very important, and these guidelines will help improve the quality of your document. Right? So let's conclude today.